when we're therapists, a lot of times we do like to know what we're doing. But then when you move into a space where you're playing with kids, oftentimes we find that it's therapeutic for us too, because then it asks us to step into roles that we wouldn't normally play, and it really grows our flexibility. So I've found that. And I was an imaginative player. Like I liked playing teacher and house and all of that stuff too when I was younger, but I would also want to go to faraway places. I'd want to like explore worlds that don't exist in reality. Like I'd want to be like the princess and have to rescue the prince from the dragon and stuff, and just turn things on its head and do things that you can't really do in real life. And so I think that's part of why I really enjoy going into pretend play with kids now and find it so transformative for them. Like, I think it's really healing and growth inducing. And there's so much that kids are learning in their emotional skills when they're playing, little pretend games that a lot of us just think are frivolous, but could actually be really important for their development.
Welcome to Therapist Uncensored. Building on decades of professional experience, this podcast tackles neurobiology, modern attachment, and more in an honest way that's helpful in healing humans. Your session begins now with Dr. Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott.
Hey, we've got a couple of things coming up we believe that you will be very interested in. So take note. This week, we're getting to sit down with Steve Porges to talk about the intersection of polyvagal theory and secure relating. That is a free webinar, and you can find that at therapistuncensored.com/events. Sign up there. It is going to be great. He's the founder of the polyvagal theory. He's a neuroscientist. He's been on this show before. People know and love him. You will know and love him if you come to this webinar. There's some opportunities to tap into some new developments with his life work that you'll hear about at the webinar. So if you're interested in polyvagal theory, if you're a therapist especially, be sure to tune in there. Secondly, life is hard these days. So monthly, we're going to be getting together. Ann Kelly and Delinda Spain are leading this. It's called the Vitality Series. You come together in a group live, and we work to be vivacious and take care of one another during hard times. It is a series, but you can sign up for individual months. It's pretty easy, again, at our website and also on these show notes. And then finally, we have a new course coming out in February. If you purchase it early, you will get the best pricing, early bird pricing. It's still available. And this course will be just an update of everything that we understand and know and learn, but specifically a deep dive into the various attachment patterns, whether it's you that are struggling with defensive relating or someone close to you. So also on our website, you'll see a tab for it. I think it's under events. So find that in our show notes. And finally, we're mentioning that life is hard these days. People are struggling. So we are going to be bringing you things just like the Vitality Series that are positive and nourishing. And today is no exception. So I sat down with Georgie Wisen-Vincent and Payne Bryson, two incredible clinicians based in Los Angeles. And they walk us through how to get back to play. We talk about resistance to play. They have a concept called play strong parenting, but I would say play strong partnering, play strong being alive, just being an individual in the world and being able to actually enjoy being here. We are on a short timeline. Everybody is, right? It's not a dress rehearsal. So why not enjoy it? We go over some specifics around strategies. Now, here's the deal. When we sat down and recorded, soon after this interview, the devastating LA fires hit. And both of them are fine. They're okay, but they are in over their heads taking care of other families that have lost their homes, family members that have been displaced, and many people that work in her clinic lost their homes as well. And then, of course, the clients. It just is a pocket of devastation. And because of all of this, they didn't get to do the pre-publicity for their book, The Way of Play. I asked her what I could do to help, and what she said was, please help get the word out about this book. It would be a way of sending Tina and Georgie love. It's called The Way of Play, using little moments of big connection to raise calm and confident kids. And if you're not convinced yet, then stay tuned. You're going to hear much more about it. But I really want to kind of come a little closer to me right now. We don't ask for a lot. We try to give a lot. Tina Payne Bryson has been there from the beginning, producing material for us. By us, I mean the world, applying neuroscience in ways that is understandable, helping parents translate this science to the benefit of their kids, breaking up intergenerational cycles of trauma. She is on the front lines. And as a favor to me, as sending love to her, as an appreciation of this field, I ask that you really consider picking up a book right now. You can stop the thing, Way of Play, available everywhere. It just came out. So that's my request, is please show them some love. And again, if you're not convinced, then hang around and you can hear more about their thinking. These are, again, science-based, research-based, but lovely and fun. So that's what this podcast is about. This is what this episode is about. Okay, enjoy. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Uncensored. It is my privilege and delight to bring to you two incredible therapists that have a new book that we're going to be telling you about. But first, why don't you guys describe yourself?
I'm Tina, and I am someone who loves the world and loves relationships and people most of the time, although, that's not real 100% of the time. But I love the brain and I love child development. And so my whole life's work has been about changing how people see kids and their behaviors from an interpersonal neurobiology lens and supporting people in their relationships.
Tina Payne Bryson has been on the show a couple of times. I would consider you a friend of ours. And you've got a couple of other books. What other things do you have going out?
So many of you may know Dr. Dan Siegel, who is my co-author of my first 4 books, The Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, The Yes Brain, and The Power of Showing Up. And then I wrote a book on my own called The Bottom Line for Baby. And then now we've got The Way of Play that I've co-authored with Georgie Wisen-Vincent, who you're going to learn about in a moment, who's wonderful. I'm also a mom to 3 boys who are adults now. And I have a center, which is actually how Georgie and I got to know each other. Georgie and I worked together at the Center for Connection that I founded about 10 years ago. That's an interpersonal neurobiology lens-based interdisciplinary clinical practice in Pasadena and Santa Barbara, California.
All right, Georgie.
So I come into the story with a lot of experience working with children, specifically as a child and family therapist. And I specialized in using play and playful techniques. I'm a play therapist to reach children in this different language, this natural language that we can often use to bypass talk-based therapy when that's just not working for our kids developmentally or cognitively. And I happened to meet Tina very much by chance. I literally bumped into her when I was shopping one day when my son was just a baby. I was pushing him around in the stroller trying to get through a long afternoon, and happened to turn to my right and see somebody that I had grown to look up to in the field. And The Whole Brain Child had been on my nightstand. I was trying to get through it, but when you have a baby, it's tough, but I was trying to be ahead of the curve, and then happened to meet Tina and was invited to come and work with her and her wonderful team at the Center for Connection in Pasadena. And we built a play therapy center within the CFC called the Play Strong Institute that now focuses on not only therapy, but also training therapists and also now teaching parents the joy of play with their kids. So thrilled to be here. Thank you.
And is there anything in particular about you that led you to focus on play?
Yeah, I think that my story around that is a little bit similar to Tina's. I remember, Tina, you saying a long time ago, you were working with kids in a sort of behavioral mode and finding that a lot of those practices cause us to come up short when we're really trying to understand and get to the bottom of why some of the behavior might be happening, especially for kids who are impacted by their neurodivergent development or trauma or really deep-seated anxieties and things like this. So I was working sort of in a behavioral therapy mode and finding that the really intense kids and their situations, it wasn't cutting it. And so I decided to go from Southern California, where I grew up, all the way to London, England, where they have a master's degree in play therapy. So I really got immersed from that very first day in this is another way of reaching children, of understanding their stories, of really truly being with them in an authentic way. And so that's kind of how I landed there and then brought it back home with me.
And I think that as you listen, even if you don't do play therapy, I was associating to couples and to just therapy in general, of like this being a really good primer of like what we're doing. So just as you're listening, you can kind of soft focus this.
Can I just jump in for a second? So one of the strategies in the book is called Make Yourself a Mirror. And obviously we wrote it for how parents can, use it to play with their children. But a friend of mine went on a first date post-divorce this last week. And she's like, we were talking about what she was going to wear. And we were talking about, and I was like, now listen, I'm going to give you a strategy. And so I actually taught her Make Yourself a Mirror for this date. So it's absolutely applicable throughout the lifespan.
That's a great example. But before we get into that, I'm just curious about your own histories of play and your relationship to play as kids and as adults even.
It's such a great question. It's so funny. As I've reflected a lot about play, as we've written this book and kind of the process of, my boys are older now and reflecting on how I played with my boys. So much of what I know about myself from my play history, like what I loved playing, is absolutely like, of course I played that way. Like it's so much who I am now. I am a highly conscientious person and I love domestic stuff. I really do. I have this big career, but I love like cooking and making sure our home is beautiful for our family. Like I love that stuff. And I played a lot that way when I was a kid, but I played librarian and teacher where I had like checkout lists and I had stamps and I had bookmarkers and things were alphabetical and I would measure the fabric and I had systems. And I also would play like Julie McCoy from The Love Boat, like give me a freaking clipboard and send me on my way. And I'm going to organize the shit out of everybody. Like this is how I played. And it's so much who I am, which is again, a great way for us to kind of really get to know people and see them and children particularly, but even adults, like how we play is such a reflection on that. I played a lot with my sister, a lot with my friends, a lot on my own, and some with my mom, not much with my dad. But most of it was like stuff I created myself and invented and used imagination for. Georgie, what about you?
Yeah, I so enjoyed hearing more about Tina's early play experiences too, because I think I gravitated as a kid, and I'm the oldest sister. I have a younger sister who's 4 years younger than me, who also ended up, working in early childhood and early mental health with kids as well. So I don't know exactly what that says about both of us in our childhoods, but we grew up, very much being like, I'm the big sister, I say how it goes. And then she would just kind of follow along and play the bit roles, the supporting roles, let's say. And I think she would probably say I'm still kind of like that in a lot of ways. But I've tempered that and I've learned to sort of channel that energy. When we're therapists, a lot of times we do like to know what we're doing. But then when you move into a space where you're playing with kids, oftentimes we find that it's therapeutic for us too, because then it asks us to step into roles that we wouldn't normally play. And it really grows our flexibility. So I've found that. And I was an imaginative player. Like I liked playing teacher and house and all of that stuff too when I was younger. But I would also want to go to faraway places. I'd want to like explore worlds that don't exist in reality. Like I'd want to be like the princess and have to rescue the prince from the dragon and stuff and just turn things on its head and do things that you can't really do in real life. And so I think that's part of why I really enjoy going into pretend play with kids now and find it so transformative for them. Like, I think it's really healing and growth inducing. And there's so much that kids are learning in their emotional skills when they're playing, little pretend games that a lot of us just think are frivolous, but could actually be really important for their development.
I think it's so important too. Like my play experiences and the way I played are very different from how my three boys wanted to play. And when I would try to play with them the way that I remembered how to play or what was natural for me was a total miss. So I think this whole approach is an invitation to really join. It really is about attunement. At its heart, it's all about secure relating. Your beautiful work, Sue, because it really asks us to let go of all of our own stuff and really join with in mutual delight. And the way my boys played was totally foreign to me. And so I had to learn how to follow their lead.
Well, one of the things I was thinking about with this is what you have come up against. Like you said, it sounds frivolous, but it's actually not. But I can imagine that it can be a real resistance to this, or not knowing how, which is why it's so good. Like I was just thinking about my play, just to join y'all, was The Wizard of Oz. That my best friend and I just played it all the time. She would be Dorothy and I would be every other character. And mainly, Toto. And I had a little dog, and the dog was Toto. But, the flying monkeys but when y'all were talking, I was wondering about that, Tina. You mentioned it about whether or not you were playing with your parents. Because for sure, for me, it was always with friends and we had a blast and it was great. But that's very much, so I was thinking about why would my mom have a hard time sitting down and playing, which I have ideas about. It was something I had to sort of learn to do. And as a matter of fact, as I was reading this, I was like, this is good for me, now in partnership and with my adult children, and just being able to get out of some of our automated thinking. And also, one question is about resistance, but then the other one too is about the idea of what is play, with people playing games on the internet or gaming in general, playing on your screens. What do you guys mean when you say play?
Yeah, I think that play can be defined in lots of different ways. So we've done our best in the beginning of the book to sort of outline that lots of forms of play are really valuable to kids and how they're growing up and how they're learning about themselves and understanding themselves and figuring out how relationships work. I could see what you described, Sue, in playing out The Wizard of Oz. If you're playing all these characters, you're figuring out how they feel and you're seeing how that resonates with your experiences, and you're bringing yourself into the characters and you're learning valuable life lessons about how people treat each other and how you're going to get from one end of the yellow brick road to the other, in one piece. That's a real story of resilience and persisting through threat and danger and challenge and, having to think on your feet and be creative and all of these things. Parents know that different forms of play are valuable for their kids, the kinds of independent, free play that we get when we're just picking up a game with a bunch of friends in the neighborhood, or we're playing with our siblings, like me and my sister, and I'm telling her what to do and she's saying, no, I don't want to play that way, and things like that. We have to learn how to struggle with each other and come to an idea that we can share, resolution, negotiation, things like that. And then there's also structured play where parents are enrolling their kids in, maybe an art class, or they're learning how to play the piano, or they're on the soccer team or whatever. And they're gaining a lot from being in group play activities, and they're learning how to follow the rules, and they're learning valuable skills for life. All of those things we find important, and we talk about that in the beginning of the book. And then there's screen-based play. I think we'll talk about that in just a minute. But this sweet spot of parents now being able to join in their kids' play, we don't just want to give parents a list of techniques and you have to do this now because our kids are different than when we were growing up, and you've got to be involved and helicopter and hang on their every word and manipulate things in a way where it's all instructional now or something like that. It's really more about being able to just understand what your kids might be working on or discovering in themselves in their play, and deepening the bonding that might happen when you're going to do things with your kids anyway. They're going to come over with, a Lego house they just made, and they're going to say, look, Mom, you've got to see this. This is so cool. So they're going to initiate these attachment moments. And so what we'd like to do is just invite parents to think a little bit more playfully, or even have it become a way of being with your kids where you could choose a playful pathway. And that might even help in moments that are a little bit more, harried or fraught or stressful or something like that, where play could be the pathway that you choose, or it becomes kind of a sensibility that you embody as a parent that's a little bit easier to tap into, because Tina and I have given you some ideas on how to do that. It helps tap into the higher parts of our brain that make it easier for us to learn things now that we've grown up past the stage where we really like banging two cars together on the rug. And that seems fun to our kids, but we don't understand it and we don't really care. And it seems kind of boring to us now. Yeah.
So I think in terms of the resistance, and really let me just add one thing Georgie said, that one of the ways I think about play is it's delight for the sake of delight. It's not purpose driven. It doesn't necessarily have a goal in mind, although goals kind of emerge organically in the play. But it's fun just for the sake of fun. And it can be dyadic or it can be solo. Screen-based is a whole other kind of thing. It can be play, but it's certainly not the kind of play we're talking about. And in fact, one of the reasons we wrote this book is there are a lot of books out there on free unstructured play and play with kids in nature and those kinds of things. But besides Lawrence Cohen's beautiful book, Playful Parenting, there really isn't a book out there about how to play with our kids. And I think that was one of the things we found as clinicians, and you've probably seen this too, Sue, is that even well-educated, intentional parents are like, okay, but I don't know what to do. Like, okay, so once I'm on the floor, then what? What do I do? Or I try to do it, my kid tells me I'm doing it wrong. Or I'll do it, but it's so boring, I can't take it for long, right? So all of those things are part of the resistance.
Or even if we go back to attachment and we think of people, the parents' attachment history, that play might be particularly challenging for folks that have these attachment disruptions and even potentially threatening, is what I was thinking.
Absolutely. You're in Austin, so you probably especially know Stuart Brown's work. He was a UT professor who went and looked at all of the Texas death row inmates following the shooting that happened at UT off the tower. Many, in the I think that was in the late 60s or early or sometime in the 70s. It was like the first big school shooting we can all remember. And he found two things were common among every single death row inmate in the Texas state system. One was a history of severe abuse, no surprise. The other thing was, and I don't remember why he did this, but he took play histories and he found that all of them had very little play in childhood. Obviously a confounding factor with abuse and neglect, but it's a protective factor. But more than that, I think, one of the reasons I think I don't remember a lot of play with my parents is because most, I think, dyadic play that happens between parent and child probably happens before age 5 or 6, where we don't have full explicit memory. We have what's called childhood amnesia, which is a normal part of how our brains develop with memory, which kind of makes me sad because I'm like, oh my gosh, I spent so much time playing with my kids in those years and they're not going to remember explicitly, but I know implicitly all of that gets encoded, and that's just as important, if not more. But I think the other thing that's for sure the attachment stuff, and a lot of parents have even what I would call play trauma. Like their parents were highly critical of them when they played, or, there were other things around that. Their parent was scary when they played. And particularly if we're talking about disorganized attachment, Sue, you and I were together at that training that Mary Main and Eric Hesse did when Dan was facilitating it, where Mary talked about when they were filming dyads who had disorganized attachment, that game that when parents play, how we get on all fours and we're like, I'm going to get you. And when we do that, there's tons of cues of safety in our tone of voice and in our facial expression. So it's activating for our kids, like, oh, it's kind of scary, but kind of exciting, but there's a whole bubble of safety around it. But with parent-child dyad, where disorganized attachment is at play, the parent, when they play that game, actually gives cues of threat and show their canines. Yeah, and have growling and really these scary kinds of things. So people may have play trauma as well. So that's kind of the trauma piece. I think the other thing that has to be part of the conversation, well, two things. One is, and Georgie has taught me a lot about this, that, our brains change. Like, right, once our prefrontal cortex gets developed, we're not imaginative in the same way we were as children, like, all of these things. So our brains are different from children's brains. So that's a piece that gets in the way. But the other thing is just the reality of life. And that is raising small children with the demands in our society that we have. We're not doing allo parenting. We don't have a lot of support. We are really in these kind of microcosms in our nuclear families. Sometimes parents don't have a co-parent. They're doing it alone. Or sometimes their co-parent does more harm and creates less help and more stress. Or even if you have the privilege of being coupled and raising a child with a partner that's helpful and supportive, the demands of society, particularly for working parents, and the standards and all the things, like you go on Instagram and you think if you're not cutting your child's lunch into woodland creature shapes, you're failing, right? Which of course is ridiculous. Please don't do that. It's not, unless that's play for you, go for it. I think that to sit on the floor, for me, and I'm again highly conscientious, to sit on the floor and let go and be fully present was very difficult because there was so much that always needed to be done. So I think that's what's beautiful too, is to think about, in this book, we talk about little moments of big connection. It doesn't have to be an hour. If you can, great, your child will really benefit and you will too. And the parents who feel most like, I'm too busy to play, I don't have time, I'm too stressed, or I don't feel playful at all because I'm so anxious and activated in threat mode all the time, we're the ones that need it most, of course. But I think there's so many things that get in the way. And that's why just saying, if you can take 10 or 15 minutes and be fully present and follow your lead and use one or two of these strategies that you can do in seconds or minutes, it's a really powerful way to build your child's skills, build your relationship with your child, know your child, help your child release stress and process what they're working on. But I have to just get one more plug for attachment in here. And that is that what we're talking about here is absolutely attachment building, because in the attachment science, there's often a big focus on the attachment system is in place in order to provide relief during distress, physiological distress, emotional distress, right? So when we're in distress, that's when we most need this secure attachment. And that is absolutely true. But the other side of that that's not talked about as much is the idea of mutual delight. And, if we're playing with our kids and we're finding it excruciating, or we're super bored, or we don't like it, or our kid's like, you're not really playing with me, you're on your phone or whatever, that's not helpful. And so if we can really find ways to do it that makes it fun for us, our kids know whether it's fun for us or not. They absolutely do. They're super perceptive. This is such a beautiful way to get in micro moments of mutual delight, which is all about secure attachment.
I've noticed that you use that term a couple of times before you just got to it more specifically about delight. And I totally love that. And I will say that in looking at the book, you describing like the reality of parenting, and instead of it being like, we should really play with our children. And, it's like the book is very realistic. It feels very realistic. And a lot of the examples that you gave were realistic. So do we want to get into any of the specific strategies? And that's the other thing, is it's very easy to read and quick to read. I love all your pullouts. So you can kind of see the main points really easy. You've got a tear out sheet. It's fantastic. So it's very approachable. But why don't we get into some of the specifics so that anybody just even listening can get the benefit of this?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the techniques are really practical when it comes to what you just mentioned, Sue, a couple of minutes ago about screen time. So we actually did a study during the pandemic when kids were, everybody was completely tech dependent. Suddenly overnight, we all had to start doing school and work. Everything was remote now. And parents, in my practice anyway, were coming to me and saying, how are we actually going to meet all our kids' needs? We don't want them to be on screens all day long, all evening. What are we going to do with them during this time? And we put together a group of parents and taught them some of these play strong strategies. We call them play strong strategies because we're really trying to make kids emotionally and mentally stronger, even as they play, to do the most natural thing in the world for them. We can take advantage of these moments, and using some of the strategies, we can sort of build and deepen their ability, not only in relationships, but also for themselves to be able to get through something as difficult and this level of adversity on families during pandemic. When, I read a statistic the other day, kids were already spending a lot of time on screens before that happened. But then I think it increased by between an hour and 2 hours a day. We were seeing a big increase in the amount of screen time, and that has stayed elevated. So parents are still saying that I'm spending a lot of time trying to get my kid off video games and, however else that shows up, being on YouTube and watching endless, cycles of videos over and over again. So one of the strategies that we talk about in the book is called dialing intensity up and down. And I think it's a nice way of sort of getting kids to see real world play as being as interesting or more interesting than screen-based games if parents are trying to do that. And there's a whole science behind why this particular strategy works. But when we think about screen-based games, we know that kids are getting a huge hit of dopamine as soon as they're on it. Every time it pings, every time they earn points, all this XP, they're getting hits of dopamine that make these games feel so addictive that they don't want to get off. It's like being in a Las Vegas casino or something. They literally, it's changing the way that their brain is wired up around getting on the game and then trying to get them off again. But if we decide to engage them in games of dramatic play, like if you invite your child, instead of building endless amounts of, buildings on Minecraft or something like that, let's make our own Minecraft fort and we'll get into the dramatic roles that this involves, or let's have a foam sword fight instead of playing Minecraft sword kind of thing, then we know that kids get like longer lasting. You know, when kids eat like chocolate, they get like a big hit of sugar, and that's like short-term energy. But you can get longer lasting feel-good hormones through dramatic play instead of being on screen, including dopamine, but other things like oxytocin, which is so important to our attachment relationships with our kids, right? And we know that kids get a bigger boost of oxytocin through rough and tumble games with their fathers, and more of the nurturing side of oxytocin when they're cuddling and they're sort of getting close and in the same physical vicinity proximity as their mothers. So I want kids to get the benefit of all of those positive hormone boosts. And when you can use the intensity that they would have put into a screen-based game and you spend a little time, even if you're just trying to get them off. So, you know, join me in a pillow fight with the same theme as the game instead of spending, you know, another 20 minutes to an hour in that game. Then I think we can play with levels of intensity that are then also stimulating those kind of long-lasting hormone boosts that are going to feed back into our relationships anyway. So that's a nice way to tie one of the techniques into a real-world situation that we are actually going to encounter with our kids.
I think in general, thinking about what we know about neuroplasticity is that the way we develop skills and abilities is through tons and tons of reps, like doing something over and over and over, repetition, 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 around where there's enough cues of safety that our brains are receptive and ready to learn. So really all of these strategies are giving kids reps to build skills. And so my favorite strategy is called bring emotions to life. I love it because it's so simple. And I'm going to give a really specific example. So my eldest, when I watched him play, I was like, you are an alien to me. Like I would hand him a baby doll and, you know, I wanted to make sure I had like all kinds of like specifically like traditionally gendered toys for him. Like I had baby dolls and I had strollers and the stuff I wanted to play. And I would hand him a baby doll and sometimes he would cuddle it. And then other times he would put it in the door jam and like try and see how much pressure it took to bash the baby's head in, you know? And thank God I'm a pediatric therapist and I know, and I've read Dr. Michael Thompson's work to know that that does not mean my child is a sociopath. And I'm like, oh, he's experimenting with pressure and proprioceptive input and these things. And I had no like weapons, but he would chew his grilled cheese into a gun. So I would watch him and I was like, whatever. So one of the things he loved, and I didn't understand it, is he loved rope and he loved tying things, knots and knots and knots and knots. So he would tie a knot onto a doorknob and then tie a knot onto the top of a castle. And he loved action figures and he would hand me an action figure and he's like, Mom, get this guy. He's up here and you got to get him down to the castle. Okay. So I could easily just like grab the guy and hook his arm on the rope and go and have him go down. Great. That's great. I'm following his lead. I'm joining. I'm totally attuned. I'm present, whatever. But here is the strategy, bring emotions to life. And what the purpose of the strategy is to introduce emotion and emotional language into the play. So without being too didactic or instructive, I basically give this character feelings. So I'm like, but I don't know if I can make it. I've never done it before. I'm kind of scared. Should I do it? I don't know if I can do it. I'm also bringing in another strategy here called make yourself a mirror, where your voice or your face or your movements are mirroring your child. So he's like, get this guy down here, Mom. And I'm like, but I don't know if I can do it. So I'm bringing in the same kind of vocal intonation. And as I learned from Dan Siegel, shared attention and shared nonverbal information is truly at the heart of what emotional connection is about. So anyway, I'm bringing this guy down. So I'm like, but I'm not sure I can do it. I'm so scared. So I'm bringing emotions to life in that moment. And what's amazing is then my kid says this, something like this. I'm going to send a guy up there to help you. It's no problem. You can do it. There's guys down here that will catch you. So now my kid is now introducing creative solutions that are relational based, like you've got support. And not that in that moment, his brain is now generalizing to anytime I'm now in adversity, I'm going to call upon other people. Like he's not having that kind of explicit generalization happening. But in the reps and reps and reps, that is happening. Neural associations are getting made between, okay, my mom's character is doing something he's never done before, and he's feeling some fear. And then some guys are going to go support him. He's going to have friends that are going to be there for him. And so these are the ways that in these micro moments of play, we are laying tracks for emotional language, for relational resilience when it comes to adversity, etc.
That is such a great example. And again, I think about just normal therapy, the mirroring, the matching, the thinking out loud. I just love this. And just what a great example. I will say that my kids sometimes would be like, I would overdo it a little bit, like turn things into teaching moments and stuff like that. So I appreciated these specific instructions. And you have these illustrations that are also really lovely that make it very easy to understand and it makes it not therapy-ish.
Yeah, and I think therapists can potentially be terrible playmates for kids, for exactly the reason you're talking about. I remember one time my son was like, "You be the bad guy, I'm going to be the good guy." And I was like, "I don't want to be the bad guy. I don't want to be the bad guy today." And he was like, "Mom, Doc," who's my mom, who's also a therapist, "Doc says there's a little bit of good guy and a little bit of bad guy in all of us. So you can be the bad guy today." And I'm like, you know what? You're right. You're right. But yeah, we can tend to be way too didactic. And particularly, Georgie is such a brilliant clinician. And the book's full of stories from her clinical work as well, where there's a particular issue at play. A parent is concerned. You have a kid who, there's a story in there about a client Georgie had with a kid who struggled with some emotional flexibility and agility when it came to being too competitive, when it came to like playing games with her family. She'd get mad when she lost and she'd destroy everything. Or you may have some significant sibling conflict that is happening that's creating a lot of havoc in the home. And so they bring their kids to therapy. And so what's amazing about these strategies is it's sort of like Georgie is bringing like the brilliance and genius of what play therapists know and giving it to parents and educators and grandparents to say, here's something you can do that helps your child learn to dial down their emotional intensity, or how to join with others more, or how to think out loud so that they start understanding their own mind, to build the skills that work on the things that we not only might be concerned about, sort of the survive stuff, but also the thrive stuff of how do we help them build those skills for going forward.
I'm really jazzed about our sponsor, Peak Nandeca. I literally drink it every morning. Sue can attest to that because I love the way it makes me feel. When they reached out to be a sponsor, I was a little skeptical because I'm not a coffee drinker, but I had really been curious because my caffeine intake had gone up and up and up because I was really craving that kind of alert focus that caffeine gave me. But I was feeling bad, too much jitters. I didn't like it. So I was really curious about this. And I can tell you that I really love it. It increases my focus, clarity, and my metabolism. I can feel the difference when I drink it. It's a slow release caffeine from probiotic fermented teas and mushrooms. They're functional mushrooms and they add cacao to enhance cellular function, and it works to balance the stress response, but it elevates my mood and my focus. And one of the fun things is that this new year, I have really wanted to get off any processed foods. And so as a side note, since I'd been drinking it regularly, I put it into assessment in AI, like, is this a processed food? I've been doing that a lot and been surprised how much things come back as processed. This was not. It is fermented tea that's triple toxin screened. So it really has unmatched purity and the fruity body mushrooms. The quality is excellent, and I loved getting an outside confirmation of that. So right now, you can get 20% off plus a free starter kit when you shop exclusively at peaklife.com/TU. So that's PIQUELIFE.com/TU, Peak Life.
Hey there, it's been a while since I've talked to you all about one of my very, very favorite sponsors. And favorite because they've been around for a long time, but also because they are literally so incredibly useful. I'm talking about ZocDoc, which is an app and a website that you can go to. This costs you nothing, $0, zero investment, and it's so easy to use. It basically, no matter what you're looking for, you can look for an immunologist, you can look for a psychiatrist, a therapist, a dentist, women's health practitioner. You can filter for example, gender affirming or trans, or let's say you have a high BMI and you're anxious about finding a medical practitioner that you're anticipating that they're going to fat shame you. You can put all of these filters in. And then what you can do, let's say you pull up some people, then you can compare them directly. There's a picture there, of course, but there's also, most importantly, patient reviews. And the reviews are real. It's a service more than a product. This is a service that I highly recommend. Bookmark it on your computer, download the app, ZocDoc.com/TU, and be sure and put the TU in so that they know that we are helping people find it. ZocDoc.com/TU. All right, thanks. I always feel kind of bad that I'm not one of those people who carry huge jugs of water around trying to stay hydrated. But I also know that hydration is one of the most basic principles of healthy living. However, even good water habits alone doesn't always do the trick, which is why 3 of 4 people are not properly hydrated. I just can't drink those neon-colored sport drinks that are full of sugar and who knows what else, which is why I'm really into this new product called Cure. That's CURE. They come in these cute little packets that I stir into my water, and they're enjoyable enough that I even stir them into my iced tea. Cure is an oral hydration solution that is as effective as an IV drip for dehydration. It's based on the science as recommended by the World Health Organization. It's the real deal. Hydration goes beyond just drinking water. It's about replenishing the electrolytes we lose through stress, travel, sweat, alcohol, illness. Water alone isn't enough to do the job. That's why you need to try Cure, the electrolyte drink mix that tastes as amazing as it makes you feel. For Therapist Uncensored listeners, Cure is offering 20% off your first order. Stay hydrated and feel your best by visiting curehydration.com/TU and use promo code TU at checkout. That's Cure Hydration, CURE hydration.com/TU. And again, use the code TU for 20% off your first order. I keep thinking about this resistance idea, or, how it can be hard. And this is what is so good about this book. But, the notion of following a child in play and sort of the resistance of but wait a minute, I'm the parent. Is that a good thing to do? Won't that create this narcissistic child? Or, they have to learn. Is those things you've heard about, or is that more just me?
Yeah, I think that before I became a mom myself, I thought this is so easy. Why don't parents just see that this is the way that you should do it? Because all of the strategies, the 7 strategies in the way of play are all based on therapeutic techniques, right? But those therapeutic techniques are rooted in just how we are in relationships, the things that we pulled from the research about what really matters in parent-child relationships and how parents and children can really not just enjoy each other, but find meaning in their relationships, to be able to be together in authentic ways, even when I'm the mom and I have to tell you that this has to go in a particular way. You have to sit this way at the table when we're at grandma's house. And that's just how you need to show manners and be polite. And I need to pull rank right now. That's really important that, and Tina says it all the time, we can't just let our kids get away with anything, because then they don't feel safe. They need to feel a sense of safety with us. And to do that, we need to provide a structure where they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that we've got them no matter what happens. So when I became a mom, I realized that kids even look for this when they're playing with us, because the way they play with us not only says a lot about who they are, but how they're internalizing security with us too. And so one of the ways that can show up when we play with our kids is that they might be on the precipice of learning a new skill for themselves. I want to build magnet tiles all the way up to the ceiling or something like that. But they may not be physically or in their motor systems ready to learn all of that quite yet. They're in process. Kids are always in process with the skills that they're developing. And sometimes, yes, we all are, right? It's our whole lives. So sometimes parents really want to help them get there. They feel a little bit anxious about what's going to happen if my kid puts a goal in front of themselves. They have a task in front of them and they're not going to be able to do it. I already know that my 4-year-old isn't going to be able to build magnet tiles all the way up to the ceiling. They can't even reach that far. So then they get their hands in and they start doing it for kids, right? Now, we want to be good parents. We want to help them as much as we possibly can. We want to make them feel successful. But we also don't want to rob them of experiences where they can build their own competence, but also experience struggle and sometimes fail or make mistakes, and see a parent who can still look like, I'm secure in the process of you learning for yourself how to do something. And I think that's where we really have these moments of convergence between, I want to let you do it and I want to let you grow in your zone of proximal development. As Lev Vygotsky said, I want you to be able to stretch, but we're also scaffolding our kids even as they grow into adolescence. And I don't have an adolescent yet myself. My son is just 10, but I can see him already kind of stretching from me and kind of going, Mom, hang back. I want to be with my friends right now, and things like that. So we have opportunities all the time to do this with our kids, and maybe not jump in and rescue them every time, but to kind of step in and be their assistant. So there's this other strategy in the book called scaffold and stretch, where it really helps you read what your child truly needs from you right then. Do they just need a secure parent to sort of come in and assist, but not to sort of take over or tell them how to do it or correct them and, maybe be perceived as critical in that moment? Or do they need the parent to sort of sit back and sit on your hands a little bit and let them struggle a little bit more and maybe come up with a solution that wasn't what you expected it to be, but they found a solution that works for them, and that's part of their growing in their ZPD. And we can sort of praise and delight in what they were able to come up with. And in so doing, they build a lot of resilience that way. And we think these little bits of resilience grow into big snowballs of resilience over time. Today, it's, can I open this jar of glue that's like sealed shut myself, maybe with a tiny bit of help, depending on how strong my little hands and wrists are. But tomorrow it could be, I'm going to, study for that big math exam all by myself, and I passed it and I feel really good about it. I got a B instead of an A, but I feel really good about what I was able to do for myself because I've built up the snowball of resilience in myself.
Georgie, I think you made such an important point there that ties me back to your question, Sue, about resistance that I think is really worth noting. And that is, I think we're in a time, and have been for a little minute, where we are uncomfortable with any emotional discomfort within ourselves, but also within our children. So it's hard to tolerate negative emotional feelings within ourselves and in our kids. And so when our kids begin to struggle in some way, we often, step in. And so I think some of the resistance in play is like, I may have to watch my kids struggle, or that's not really fun. One of the questions I often invite parents to reflect on is, what's getting in the way of you really being fully present and being able to trust what's happening, trust development, trust these kinds of things. And I think it's so important to ask this question. Am I stepping in here and over-functioning? And I'm choosing that word on purpose. Am I stepping in here and over-functioning, whether it's in play or in your child or your college kid or your 30-year-old child's life? Are you stepping in and over-functioning because it's actually a scaffolding that your child needs in order to build a skill and feel supported and to feel secure attachment, which, by the way, always has a launching pad, not just the secure base? Or am I stepping in and over-functioning because it makes me feel less anxious? And I think that's the key question for whether or not we're actually providing that sort of scaffolding and support that you're talking about, or we're rescuing and distracting and doing things that not only don't help our child build those skills, but they also give a message that is implicitly internalized that I don't think you can handle this, so I must need to step in. And then that becomes part of how they believe about themselves as well.
Oh, this is so great timing as a parent of young adults launching this over-involvement. And that question is a really, really good one. And I had another example come to mind. Well, first of all, I hear that like by holding back, you're allowing the child to have these moments of mastery. I always think of like the chrysalis. And, if like you see them struggling and you open the chrysalis for them, that it actually is harmful to the little creature. So an example, you had mentioned the sandwich and the gun earlier. I also was raised, oh yeah, don't give them guns and things like that. And then I just saw that everything, the carrot, whatever. And I had gotten somebody had just sort of assured me about this. And so we went the other way and we were like, we're going to do this and we're going to let this. But it had to do with holding back our own anxiety, that we're not creating sociopaths. And then in doing that, they would shoot me, play shoot me. I would fall over dead. And the very next thing, they're over there doing CPR or they're resetting, so then they get the whole experience and a chance to modulate their aggression. Sometimes it's a little too much, two boys, and we did a lot of rough house and still do. Their love language is a punch in the shoulder, like pick me up in the kitchen and move me over, it's very sweet that way. But sometimes it would go too much. And so by holding back, then they figure that out. And the idea that you couldn't resuscitate your opponent, it suddenly turns not into play. But they could feel that a little bit and then be able to experience modulating their aggression. So that was just a particular thought about that. Another thing I wanted to say that was good about your book is that you give not only examples of what to do, including the visual of it, which is just lovely, but you also give the visual of what not to do, and like common mistakes. That's what I meant by calling it realistic. Like the whole, building the Legos and like, no, don't do it that way. The thing goes here, or the corrections. All of that is in there so that you can see yourself in a non-shaming way where you don't feel bad, because it's like, it's in there because it happens. But then it gives us, what to do. So really love that about it.
We started out with no weapons. We ended up with an entire huge storage ottoman full of weaponry. And it's an opportunity to also have conversations about what happens if you saw a real gun, right? And that's obviously not a play moment, but it's something that can come off of that. So I'll just hit another strategy that we briefly mentioned, but didn't really define related to that. And that's make yourself a mirror. And this is where we take body, face, or voice. Don't do all three at once, because then it's like you're copying someone and that's annoying. But the idea that you either use your face or your voice or your body and you mirror what you're seeing in them. Maybe, not exactly, but kind of similarly. It reminds me so much of Alan Shore's work on right brain to right brain resonance and Peter Fonagy's work and all of these things where you really are joining right brain to right brain through nonverbal communication. And that's really what this one's about. And it gives a felt sense that I am seen, I am known. So basically, if your kid grabs, the gun and they're like, I'm going to get you. And you're like, oh no. And you join in with that kind of same level of intensity. And then maybe you're like with the other one and you're moving your body in the same kind of way, or if they go, then you go with your face as well. So you're doing voice and face. These are the kinds of things where we're just mirroring in these little micro moments. And then that also leads to the one that Georgie mentioned earlier about dialing intensity up or down. So maybe you're like, no, that's too rough. And Georgie taught me this great phrase that's in the book about, can you try medium? That was too rough. Can you try medium? So then they're having to practice motor and emotion regulation to monitor and modify their levels of intensity physiologically and emotionally, neurophysiologically. So all of these strategies can come together in these real moments that unfold.
A lot of times when our kids are trying out play fighting or aggression in play, a lot of times we see like the first little glimmer of it and we go, oh my gosh, it's about a gun, or, they're hitting me so hard or something like that. And we tend to kind of shut it down quickly before we really know what it's about. So Sue, I'm so glad that you were sort of like, oh, if I just wait a minute and I see where they're going with it, then I see that they're about to resuscitate me, and that can move us into round 2. And it's an opportunity to modulate aggression. And you use the word modulation. And Tina said about the right brain, oftentimes our kids get a little worked up in their play because they're dealing with a theme that might be a little bit grown up, maybe aggression or how we handle conflict or something like that. And they don't quite know what to do with the emotional and the physical sensations that they're having, like the sensory experience of this play, at the same time as they're dealing with really big questions that they're moving from concrete to abstract thinking around. Like, should somebody punish the other person for doing something wrong if they did something wrong in the first place? Or, like these big life questions and things like that. Sometimes our kids can go really deep in their play if we just give them enough time to let the story unfold. a little bit. So maybe just waiting a beat to see, where is my kid going? Is there a story taking place here? And are they killing me off because they're about to begin the story again? You know, when you get deaded in play, a lot of times that's the end of round one and we're going into round two kind of thing. It doesn't necessarily mean they're obsessed with killing or something like that. So I would also suggest our strategy, narrate to integrate, which is, can I help put together the emotions and the sensations that the right brain is registering for my child with a little bit of left brain logic at the same time? So if I start narrating what they play and they're like, okay, well, you robbed the bank, so now I'm going to shoot you and you're not going to jail, you're just going to die this time or something like that. Then I'd be like, oh, instead of having me go to jail to learn my lesson, you decided that I was going to, that's it, it's over, it's curtains for me, mister, that kind of thing. So that they go, oh my gosh, there's decisions that I'm making here. And this is an unfolding story. You're adding logic so that they're not so flooded in the right brain and they're making sense of everything that's coming up sensory-wise through their body at the same time. And then they go, yeah, in round two, and then they embellish the story and they bring more of their own logic in. And we start what Tina calls oscillating between right and left brain. Suddenly now they're in more of an integrated state. And we can do all of that just by not shutting down play that doesn't really make sense to us initially, but we can use one of the way of play strategies to make more sense of it with our kids and therefore give them more brain balance and balance of their decision-making abilities too, whether we're talking about play or real life.
And just like in therapy, if you shut it down, if someone says something like, hey, I was really aggressive with somebody this week, and you shut it down, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you did that. And or like, no, you can't do that. That's not what people do. We'll never hear about that again. And the same thing with play themes with our kids. They're opportunities to have input into what they're already thinking about. If we shut it down or we become too didactic around it, we are just not going to hear about it.
Versus like in therapy, you actually want to, again, amplify a little bit. How angry are you? Say more, say more. And, this thing about the story, like I mentioned Wizard of Oz, for my boys, it was Lord of the Rings. So the weapons weren't very specific to fantasy and hero figures that they were emulating.
And often protecting.
And the reason that we're fighting is to save the ring, like there's a purpose and a vision. So this is wonderful. And I don't think we've said the name of the book enough, Way of Play, using little moments of big connection to raise calm and confident kids. So the Way of Play. You're a good title. I don't know if, Georgie, you may have done that, but Tina, I love your titles of your books are actually really great.
This one was all Tina.
Oh, it sounds like Tina. I could have recognized it.
As you know, it's really hard to pick a title of the book. And, The Whole Brain Child, that's a strange title, but it worked. But yeah, I think we chose, Georgie and I spent a lot of time talking about this title and playing with different options. I think we ended up landing on the Way of Play because it's not just something you do, it's a way of being with our children. And it's not just like, we're now going to pull out the toys and play, or we're going to the playroom and playing, or we're going to the park. It really is a way of being with our kids. And in the moment when they won't get out of the bathtub, or when your teenager, is really mad at you about something, or they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, and there's a boundary that needs to be set, like we can bring this way of play and this playfulness when appropriate that is about how we want to be in relationship with our children and with others. So it really is a way of being.
Well, it's a way of co-regulating, just to use that language a little bit. One of the things I love about this conversation is that we're weaving between these silly examples, that brings us joy to talk about, with the psychology and the neuroscience. So in one moment, we're speaking about, a sandwich, that is shaped into something. And next minute, there's all this kind of technical jargon. And I love that, actually, because there's a way that people can believe it. Like, this isn't just somebody's good ideas. This is the distillation of neuroscience. And play, even in couples, it's a way to regulate the amygdala and the threat response system, that if we're signaling a little bit of levity, that it's a way of, preventing the person from going to the back of the brain and then things devolving. So humor and play is a really important part of that. So it's wonderful.
Dan Siegel, my favorite definition of regulation, co-regulation, came from Dan, which is regulation. He defines it as the ability to monitor and modify our states. So co-regulation then would be the ability to monitor and modify someone else's state. So it really is at its heart about tuning in and resonance and really sort of monitoring where and sensing the other nervous system, and then kind of coming alongside to move toward more. And I'm just going to use your beautiful book title, secure relating. I think, parents will often say, like, I don't have the energy to do an effing puppet show to get my kids to put their shoes on. And I think, we feel a lot of resistance. I think about these moments where we're like, oh my gosh, the amount of energy cognitively and physically and emotionally I might put into the battle with my child could be totally sidestepped by starting a playful story. Like, there were these 3 squirrels who got into big trouble one day. If you get your shoes on and get in the car, I'm going to tell you what bad thing they did and what happened next. Like, then they're like, they can't wait to hear what happened. And I don't know either. This is going to be probably a really stupid story because I'm just going to make it up in a second. And I have no idea what the squirrels did, But I think bringing that playfulness, and with our teenagers, one night my son was supposed to come downstairs and I was really annoyed because we were kind of on a tight schedule. He's supposed to come down. Family dinner is like mandatory, crucial, important in my family. And he was supposed to come downstairs and I'm like texting him and he's not responding, and I'm calling up and he's not responding because his ear things are in and he's listening to music and he can't hear me. So I come upstairs and I could have easily been like, why aren't you tracking the time? I needed you downstairs. Like, I could have gone that way and that would have been fine. That wouldn't have destroyed our relationship or been bad for him. That would have been, a consequence of what he was doing. But instead, because I practice, and again, this gets easier the more we do it, is I'm 5'4" and he's 6 feet tall. And I sat on him. He was like being sloth boy in his bed. And I sat on him and I was like, I'm so glad you didn't come downstairs for dinner when you were supposed to, because I'm so tired from walking up the stairs to come and tell you it's time for dinner. I need to sit down and rest. And you're a really good resting place. So I'm being kind of sarcastic, but it's playful. And I make the point that I'm supposed to make, but he kind of is like, you're so weird. And he kind of pushes me. And so it doesn't activate the kind of adversarial moment that it could have been.
Yeah, I think that play does communicate safety. We can't really play in a threat state, right, Tina? This is something that you've been saying to me a lot recently. So when we're feeling overwhelmed as parents, that's when sort of our automatic tendency to sort of snap at our kids or to be in a foul mood, and they can see it in us. They know, like, oh gosh, I'm getting that mom or I'm getting that dad right now. That can determine how the next 10 minutes or hour or the rest of the day is going to go, right? Like, that can really send us in a space where we're going to have a rupture, and that could affect the whole rest of our day or our week or a month or whatever. But like, when my kid, like, let's say I ask him to do something, it doesn't get done. And I come back in to ask him, like, why didn't you take your plate and your dish and everything and your cup and everything from your room down to the kitchen? And he can see in my face, sometimes I'll come up and I'll even intentionally put on what looks like it's going to be an angry face because that's what he's expecting, right? But if I'm regulated enough, then I can put on a little bit of a show, and I'm in control of myself enough that I know I'm going to kind of surprise him. And if I can surprise him with my regulated state, quite frankly, I'm coming in and he's like, oh yeah, do the thing about the mad mommy, like do that mad mommy thing. And I'll stomp around the room and I'll be like, I'm coming in and I'm going to give you a big lecture on how important it is to be considerate of each other. And he's like, yeah, good. And as I'm doing it, he's picking up the plate and he's picking up the cup and the old wrapper and the stuff. And he's like, yeah, let's do it together and we'll stomp down the stairs together. So it's almost like the flip of what Tina just said, is that the play enables us to stay better regulated because we know it's something that we can choose and it's going to motivate our kids. But if we can regulate ourselves, then we can approach them with play. And that's going to mean that they meet us and mirror us in more of a regulated state, and we can gain more of their cooperation and ability to respond positively to what we're trying to teach and instill, like the values we're trying to instill in them in the moment, and just, be a part of this family routine. I need you to get it together right now, kid.
Well, I think that this is incredible. It's like the positive neuroplasticity and intentionally using neuroscience, like you're saying, to spread this playfulness rather than the sternness and things like that. So how could people, if they're interested, find you guys? And is there anything else that y'all are doing that you would like to share?
Yeah, we've got a long-running play therapy certificate program if folks are interested in training in the full, I want to become a therapist that employs play as a healing art with children. And adults as well. I want to infuse my therapeutic sessions with more creativity and joy and neuroplasticity, as you said earlier. We have an incredible certification program that we offer that's completely online and self-paced, and people can do it, just when you have a little bit of downtime in between writing progress notes or whatever, just follow your own bliss with it. We also have training on neuroaffirming practice. If you're working with neurodivergent individuals, we have a smaller, shorter, quicker course on that as well. We're developing more resources for parents once the book comes out. But for right now, you can check out all of the trainings that we offer for professionals at playstronginstitute.com. And there's also a page that highlights the book too. So you can find the book there as well, but also through Tina's website and everything Tina offers.
Yeah. So of course, the Way of Play book, we'd love some support in getting the word out about that. We're both on social media. I'm most easily found on Instagram, and my handle there is Tina Payne Bryson. Georgie's is
Georgie Wisen-Vincent.
And it's Wisenvincent. And then, of course, we both have websites, tinabryson.com and Georgie's website,
GeorgieVincent.com.
And then if you're interested in the interpersonal neurobiology interdisciplinary clinic, that website is thecenterforconnection.org. And we obviously provide therapeutic services in the state of California. A couple of our clinicians are licensed in other states, but we do parent support and education and that kind of consultation kinds of things all over the world. So please find us there. Even if you're just interested in what does an IPNB-based interdisciplinary practice look like, come check us out.
This has been very much part of my learning journey, the IPBN stuff. Also, you can find this, if y'all didn't catch those specifics, they'll all be in our show notes. You can find that at therapistsuncensored.com.
And can I just tell your audience really quickly, your book, Secure Relating, is one of my very favorites of the last 10 years. And in fact, at our center, we obviously do pre-licensed supervision, and we have some pre-licensed clinicians, but most of our clinicians are already licensed and are very experienced. And we do ongoing group supervision for anybody who wants to participate, whether they've been licensed a long time or not. And they pick books and do book clubs. And right when your book came out, there was a group of people who did group supervision, and it was the biggest group soup we have had. It was a huge group, like 20 or 25 of our clinicians joined in and read the book, and it has been incredible for them in their work. So I just want to take a moment to give a shout out to you and Anne and your beautiful book. And I'm just a huge fan for my team, but also just in the world. I can't tell people enough about it.
Oh, that's so incredibly meaningful. It really is. Before we got on, I was thanking Tina for coming to our book launch, our online book launch that had just this incredible group of professionals in the attachment world. So thank you very much for that. It's really sweet. But I also caught the word book soup. Is that what you said?
Group supervision.
Group soup. That's what I meant. Group soup.
Soup is actually more fun. I'm going to tell them to change it. I like that.
And we do also have reading pods. You can find out what we're up to at therapistsuncensored.com/events. And in particular, are you going to be either of you going to be at the Psychotherapy Networker Conference?
Oh, I was thinking about it. Are you going to be there too, Sue?
We are. Anne and I are speaking for the first time there, so we're very nervous about it, but I'm sure many of your mentors and teachers are going to be there. Come meet them live. It's a fantastic place to connect, and you can find that at pesi.com/TU. And if you want to come, be sure and put in SYM50, and that'll give you another $50 off of your ticket. Anne and I went for the first time last year. We do all other kinds of conferences, and we were really impressed. Huge event.
It's kind of an amazing think tank kind of group love fest for all the nerdy therapist people like us out there.
The neuro nerds.
And huge thought leaders. You and Anne should definitely be there, and the beautiful work that you're doing. And so, yeah, it's a great conference. I've been to it many times.
Fantastic. Thank you guys for joining us so much. And we had a weird thing happen with our podcast where that we got dropped off of Spotify. We had to reset our podcast on Spotify, which means we lost a ton of followers. We lost all of our reviews. Like we have 1.3 thousand on Apple, and now we have like 4 or something on Spotify. So anyone listening, if you wouldn't mind, even if you've heard us on Spotify, to look us up on Spotify and please follow through there. And if you are ever so kind, to leave us a review so we can slowly begin to build those back up. It's been a real blow to our numbers and everything, which matters. So Tina Payne Bryson is showing me on her phone that she's taking care of it. And the other just weird thing is you can't just turn it on and rate it, even if you've heard it a million times, because it thinks that you've never heard it. So even if you want to turn it on and turn it down and just let it play for a minute, then you can rate it.
You have so many amazing episodes, and I haven't listened to all of them. So this will be another opportunity for me to go back in and swim in the beautiful podcast you guys have created.
And I don't have my phone next to me. Otherwise, I'd be doing it at the same time. So I'm going to run to do it right now.
It's such a strange thing to ask. All right. Thanks, you guys. Please follow up and get this book, Way of Play. I'm definitely getting it. And gifting it is a great idea. And your last book, what was it again, Tina?
The Bottom Line for Baby.
That's another one that I've gifted to people that is really good for parents.
It was the book that I most wanted as a new mom, and it still didn't exist. So I wrote it, and it's alphabetical, 65 topics that people get the most competing advice about, like co-sleeping and all that. And I basically just, every section is like, what are the main schools of thought? What's the science say? And what's the bottom line? But the book overall is basically the bottom line of the whole bottom line is trust yourself, trust your baby, and do what works for your family.
It's really fantastic. And I have 5 people that I supervise right now that all just sent me emails saying they're all pregnant, like at the same time. So I'm sending it to everyone. It's like
and one of the things I like about that particular book is sometimes what you end up concluding is not what you would think. Like, it's not necessarily the straight, like, well, you really shouldn't do this thing. It's more of like, well, actually, so it's very surprising. And yeah, the parents that I've given it to just love it. And it's a great resource because it is, again, science-based. So thank you guys for listening. Please share the episode if you will, and we will see you around the bend.
Therapist Uncensored is Ann Kelly and Sue Marriott. This podcast is edited by Jack Anderson.